So for the first time ever, Sunday of current year in July of current year, you're now alleging the Epstein files aren't about the Democrats, but were actually created by the Democrats. And this makes everyone think, if his inclination is to say the files are fake, there must be something bad about them, about him in them. He's making the connection for everyone else. Come on, guys. The Epstein files aren't supposed to be made by Democrats. They're supposed to be about Democrats. It's a good offensive tool that they like to use. To convert it into a defensive explanation feels bad. It must show a complete lack of any understanding of the audience, of the MAGA base, or panic. And I smell fear. Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description. As I talked about before, I gave you the kind of background of the Epstein situation, that this has been brewing for a while, especially in the MAGA spheres of the internet. When I say this has been brewing, I mean this sort of comeuppance. What you're seeing right now is what I will describe as a comeuppance. A comeuppance. The monster that was created by Trump and his sycophants and his loyalists is now upon them. To put a phrase on it, the chickens have come home to roost. You guys ever hear that phrase? The chickens have come home to roost. For years, Trump and MAGA have traded on conspiracy after conspiracy. If it isn't Pizzagate, it's QAnon. Alternative facts, stolen election, all the COVID misinformation and bullshit. You name it. Now, I say that, and I'm right, but let's be clear about something. There's some weird stuff about the Epstein situation. I don't find it weird that he killed himself. I don't find it particularly strange that, like, a guard fell asleep. But put together all the factors, all the situations, all the connections, and I can understand why a normal person looking at that is like, something doesn't feel right. That said, I want to be clear about where I stand. And where I stand is, I don't know what happened. I don't know the extent to which Epstein's crimes involve other third parties. I have no clue whether there was a government cover-up. And here's what I'll say on the matter. I have not been convinced that there's proof to demonstrate those things. That said, notwithstanding the fact that, I don't think we've seen smoking gun proof for this stuff, and notwithstanding my suspicions and misgivings, the MAGA Republicans absolutely need to be held to their standard, absolutely need to be held to account for the claims they spread as fact. It's not only the case that Donald Trump has a responsibility to account for his actions and his surrogates' actions. It would be politically stupid not to press them on this as Democrats. And actually, there's a lot of sus shit. I was leaning on the side of 55% official narrative, if gun to my head, but unsure, until I saw the tweet that we're all gonna, or the truth that we're all gonna talk about in a second from Trump. And that put me back squarely in like 50-50, I'm not sure. Because goddamn does he sound guilty as fuck. It is one of the most suspicious public declarations I've ever seen. But before we get into that, I want to take a step back even further and impress upon you the importance that the conspiratorial mythology plays in the MAGA ideologue's mind. Stolen election, COVID shit, Pizzagate, QAnon. It's the fabric of this entire movement is conspiratorial thinking. And in some ways, that is also the story of fascism. The stabbed in the back theory for the Germans, the mythology of the, Aryan race theory. Fascism lives on mythology, on conspiracy, on insiders. So it doesn't surprise me that has been interwoven as an integral element of the MAGA movement is mythological conspiracy. So where we were last week was a puzzle. The puzzle number one, which is how can the administration be this incompetent from a purely pragmatic, ruthless sense? If you really didn't want to talk about this shit, you could have just ignored it. You could have said nothing, and you wouldn't have stirred the hornet's nest. It was a mistake for Pam Bondi, and I understand why MAGA's upset. It was a mistake for Pam Bondi to say what she said and keep talking it up like she had the goods. It was a mistake for Pam Bondi to invite all these dipshits to the White House with their little binders, right? Phase one, the Epstein files. Not knowing, either because you're so incompetent that the information contained therein was public information, already known or already released, or not caring. That was an error. And no one can explain that in a way that doesn't make Pam Bondi and everyone else in the White House look incredibly incompetent. From a pure ruthless perspective, from a pure realpolitik perspective, that was a blunder. The decision to double down on that blunder by sending Kash Patel and Dan Bongino around to make their circuits and say, he killed himself. I've seen it. This was a suicide. I've seen it a million times. That was also puzzling. Puzzling in that it was a mistake. And then the decision on the Sunday, after the one big beautiful bill is signed, after a bunch of other newsworthy shit is happening, to release that 2-page memo saying nothing to see here, folks, move along, galactically stupid. Absolutely stupid. Just, again, looking at this purely from a pragmatic standpoint, just looking at it from Machiavellian perspective as a chessboard. If you're Littlefinger, why the hell are you bringing attention to this? But once that memo was released, it started a clock in my mind. A clock for when a head would need to roll, a metaphoric head would need to roll. Because once that memo was released, there are no good answers anymore. You've brought attention to this matter. You can't just say, as Trump did, why are you asking questions about this? Bro, you just released a document on the thing yesterday or 2 days ago. I think he said it on Tuesday after they released it on a Sunday. It's been a week now. But we're asking questions because your DOJ released information about it. What, we're not allowed to answer, or, ask you questions on the things that you released? You felt it important enough to bring all these loser influencers into the White House. So clearly you think it's a priority. You said it was a priority, right? The mere fact that you had the phase one, we understand how important this is, for you to parade this issue, for all of the members of your inner circle to have been talking about this shit for years leading up to the 2024 election, proves it was a big deal. So no one is going to buy the whole, oh, do you really care about this shtick that they were trying to pull at the start of the week, and which he's repeated now with this tweet that we'll talk about in a second. So that was a bad option. Once that memo released, I knew right away, and I'm vindicated, that Pam Bondi was going to be at the center of this. Not like it was difficult to predict, but that Trump would stand by Pam Bondi. And I predict, by the way, that unless there's really some pretext or he gets pushed super, super, super hard, he'll continue to stick by Pam Bondi. But Pam Bondi is at the center of this because, one, she's a woman. Need I say more? Two, she did make herself a target by building up the hype 100%. And even though I said I could understand the misspoke angle, I'm even going to give you a hot take. I actually, if you were to put a gun to my head, I would say I believe the misspeak explanation by Pam Bondi. I know that's crazy. I wouldn't give her the benefit of the doubt. The only reason I'm doing this is because I'm being ultra charitable. But I also understand why MAGA is upset about that. Because she literally said the list is on the desk if you listen to the question and then the answer. But it doesn't matter. You can't be that incompetent to not distinguish those things in your mind. Either you're not aware of the terminology here, you didn't hear the question, or at the time you released the memo, you didn't think you were going to get called on that, or you didn't remember making the statement. So again, Pam Bondi absolutely made an enemy of the MAGA base by building them up and making mistakes along the way. But then finally, she's the head of this deep state entity that they want to refer to, which is the Department of Justice, long a target for the MAGA ideologues, the Department of Justice. So they're already prone to dislike whoever Trump nominates as AG eventually. It happened with Sessions, right? Sessions was a day one Trump person, and then they hated him. Then, you know, Bill Barr, there were some people who were like, trust the plan, but then they hated him when he said the election wasn't stolen, or there's no evidence that the election was stolen. And so just merely being at the head of an organization that you've been taught is corrupt, you're already on thin ice, and you should know that, right? You should know that these people are not your friends. Pam Bondi was too close, was too cute. She really believed that all these people were friends and were going to back her. She's too naive. She's playing up years and years of resentment built in previous administrations, including Trump versus, Trump term one. But if you're just going on Fox News, if you're just going along to get along, if you're just playing nice with all these people and you're not realizing that, knives are going to come out for you. It doesn't matter how loyal you are to Trump. People are going to scapegoat. Just like they scapegoated Mike Pence, by the way. Mike Pence, who was incredibly loyal throughout his first tenure or his only tenure as vice president. People forget, like, Pence was not a never Trump guy. During the administration, he was a stalwart ally for Donald Trump. And it didn't matter jack shit when it came time to put a damper on the conspiratorial mythology and plans of the MAGA base. At that point in time, Mike Pence was discarded. And Pam Bondi was never going to survive contact with that level of resentment and then what she was going to have to say. The fact also that it was this initial memo was unsigned and undated made it seem weird. The fact that it was released on Sunday made it seem, that they were trying to sneak something by. So horrible optics already. Tactical mistake on tactical mistake, compounding failures. But here's the dilemma. If you're Trump, as we've talked about, you can't fire Bondi. Because if you fire Bondi, it's going to be a world of shit. You're going to have to nominate a new attorney general. You have less political capital. Regardless of whether you can get him on, you probably could get someone on. Probably not someone as crazy as before, because now you're going to be fighting, a more concerted opposition. And even if you can get someone crazy through, in the hearings, you know what's going to happen. All the questions are going to be about this Epstein matter. Every single question. Do you commit to releasing the files? Do you commit to the releasing the files? You can't fire Pam Bondi. Notwithstanding the fact you don't want to fire Pam Bondi for Trump. Why don't you want to fire Pam Bondi? Because she's been your lapdog this entire time. She's defending you, deporting people without due process to a foreign gulag. She's defending you, getting bribed up the ass from Qatar to Timbuktu, with the fucking meme coin, all that shit. She has been a complete stooge, the ultimate puppet for the administration. So you don't even want to fire Pam Bondi because you like her. You think she's doing a good job if you're Trump. Firing her is unacceptable. So you have to keep her. But how can you keep her? If you keep her, who are you going to let go? Well, now Kash Patel and Don Bongino know that, they don't want to be put under the bus. They're rats, right? These people are rats. They know that, Trump is going to be around for how many more years in office? Even assuming he were able to get like complete his term, because he's the oldest president we've ever had, not for any other reason. 2-3 years? How much do you think that loyalty is to you, Kash or Dan Bongino? What happens when you become the scapegoat and you're going to try to get a job in the civilian world as a podcaster? Who's going to come watch you? You're the traitor. You're the scapegoat. So you're fighting for your meal ticket if you're Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. At least Pam Bondi, she would have her, experience in government work. She could get maybe a legitimate job in some other crazy Republican state. Not the same for Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. People who think that you're a scapegoat are going to be less inclined to hire you. For what end? You're for the same reason of Pam Bondi, right? But also you've burned bridges in the legitimate world, for sure. You want to make it seem as though the person whose fault this is Pam Bondi. And so you're going to play up, if you're Dan Bongino or Kash Patel, oh, there are inner conflicts. Oh, Bongino is being forced out. And that's going to raise your stature. If you're Dan Bongino, you're like, you want to be out anyway because you don't even like this job. The sad part is these people don't even want to be and do the job. They just want to go and shitpost online, and they want to just do press conferences, and they just want to get interviewed. They don't actually want to do the work. That, by the way, extends to Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi, who's like on Fox News all the time. So you're incentivizing a kind of office politics where people know that Trump's time in the office and in the limelight and power as a human being on this earth is limited. He's an old person. He's term limited. So now the office politics dynamic is putting more pressure on Pam Bondi, which is more pressure on Trump, because Trump is ultimately the one who's deciding to keep Pam Bondi in office. He doesn't want to fire her. But if the other people who are leaking to the press, it's Pam, it's Pam, it's Pam. And if now the influencers are getting that message and going on TPUSA and saying, who wants Pam Bondi to resign? If Laura Loomer's out calling for her head, it's ratcheting up the pressure and it's making Trump look worse. His decision to keep Pamela, in office looks worse the more that Dan Bongino and Cash fight for their meal ticket, and the more the influencers are willing to throw under the bus because he's sticking by her. So that's a pickle. If Dan Bongino leaves anyway, what he's going to do, the first thing he's going to do is start the podcast circuit. He's going to go around talking all kinds of shit to try to build up his credibility. It wasn't my fault. It was these people. It was these people. It was these people. The best thing Trump can do is keep the family together. Don't let them leave. Try to keep Dan Bongino in the administration. But you sent out that memo, and that just is untenable. It's untenable because that memo conflicts with the dogma. It conflicts with the dogma that was established as a conspiratorial mythology. Again, as someone who is agnostic, I don't know what happened. That's not true for the MAGA faithful in the MAGA ideologue. And we'll see that in some of the things that I'm reacting to today. That's not true of them. They're not agnostic on the outcome here. They are quite certain. So someone like me, right? I'm willing to be convinced by evidence, but they're already convinced on no smoking gun proof, right? And by the way, I've seen some left-wing commentators speaking with too much certainty. I think that you're right to put blame on the administration. Hell, I've been trying to do that, put some pressure on them and all that shit, 100%. But the difference is the MAGA faithful, the MAGA ideologue, they're already convinced the other way, and there's nothing you could show them that would change their mind about that. And this is where I get into it with someone like Viva Frey, who's one of the goobers we're going to look later on. People like Viva Frey, who I've enjoyed having conversations with in the past, this critique is meant as an honest critique here. He's completely got it wrong. The way Viva Frey would tell you it's a process issue. What Trump needs to do now is have an independent investigator and a committee to do it the right way. The problem is the process. No, the problem isn't the process, guys. The problem is the conclusion, right? The problem isn't how you arrive at that conclusion. Think about it like this. If they don't believe Kash Patel and Dan Bongino that there's no conspiracy here, you think they're going to believe someone more independent? Right? If they don't even believe their sycophants, do you think that they're going to believe some independent investigator if they come to the same conclusion? There is nothing, I repeat, nothing that you could show these people that would convince them that it's not true. And it's not a process issue. It's that the substantive conclusion is part of their dogma and mythology. It's built in to their closed system of thought. They're not going to be convinced by a tighter process. They're not going to be convinced by a more deliberate inquiry with greater transparency unless the outcome is what they want it to be. Now that could be the truth. It could be the case, right? That the truth is that there was a cover-up and a conspiracy. I'm agnostic on that. I've already told you. But if there's not that, right? If it's the case that third parties aren't implicated in the way they think, or that the government isn't responsible for a cover-up, or if let's say the intelligence connection to Epstein is either not there, tenuous, or minimal, right? Yes, there's an intelligence connection, but it relates to something else, and it's not really about the sex stuff or the crimes, right? That's what I'm talking about. Now, you can take the cover-up angle different ways, right? Maybe there's a cover-up of the embarrassing stuff, right? If I had to guess now, if I thought there was a cover-up by the administration, it wouldn't be that necessarily that Trump was involved in a criminal way. It's maybe he was peed on by some prostitute or something. I don't know. Not criminal, not with a minor or something. If I had to guess, again, this is just pure conjecture. And that's what all this kind of is. It's conjecture. There's stuff that smells weird. But by the way, there's a lot of sourcing on quotes, on determinations that people are way too sure about. On the notion that Acosta said there was an intelligence, that he knew that Epstein was involved with an intelligence agency. That is not sourced well. And people are saying that with reckless abandon, but they don't care about it. Because for them, now that's a confirmed fact. And there is nothing, I'm telling you, nothing that you will be able to tell these people that will convince them that, in fact, they're wrong about it. There's no process-oriented way to structure the investigation such that it will actually have the desired effect of convincing people, especially now. So you could appoint some, if you were to appoint tomorrow, if you were to actually appoint someone like, who's leading the parade here? Jack Posobiec or Nick Fuentes or one of these other guys who's very much, at least their optics is that they believe in the Epstein stuff. And they came out tomorrow and said, nope, nothing to see here. Everyone would say they're in on it. You think we're going to believe this cover up? They'll find some other aspect of what they're saying to not believe. Oh, you think we're going to trust this person? He didn't even know it for Trump. He was a never Trumper in this whatever time. Oh, did you know that Jack Posobiec is a Polish citizen? How do we know Poland is it? So you're trying to push on a door that is blocked by 5 miles of cinder blocks. Never gonna happen. Never gonna happen. So I have to differ quite strongly with my friend Viva Frey, acquaintance Viva Frey. It's not a process issue. There's a contradiction here. There's a contradiction between the mythology and the representation by the administration. It's an unfalsifiable belief. It's like trying to convince someone God doesn't exist. Good luck with that. Some people might be convinced, right? When you hear the arguments, the problem of evil, if you rebut the ontological argument, whatever the shit is, right? Some people might be convinced, but you're not going to get the people who, for them, it's part of who they are. Their belief isn't just like any other belief for me or you, right? Their beliefs are part of their character and they view them as coextensive. An attack on your belief is an attack on yourself. And it sort of gets to why I focus on Pam Bondi in my article. By the way, new article on Tuesday, free. The premium articles will also start to be released this week. Channel update. That's why I focus on Pam Bondi in my article, is because everyone's going to circle around Pam Bondi, but it doesn't matter that it's Pam Bondi. It's funny that it's Pam Bondi. She deserves it. She made her mistakes, but it actually doesn't matter. And all Pam Bondi can do now is cling to Trump. But the thing is, Trump is pressured just like Bondi is. And their incentives are actually aligned here, which is to get people to forget about it. But Bondi will attempt to be scapegoated by people. You're already seeing it from the Laura Ingrams of the world and from everyone else talking shit about Bondi. And I could see that too, right? And I was trying to egg that on a little bit of my tweets. Look at my tweets, the first ones after the memo came out, under Charlie Kirk, under Jack Posobiec. I was saying, are you calling on Bondi to resign? Are you calling on Bondi to resign? It was so predictable. It's not a crazy prediction. It was eminently predictable that this would be the line. And it was also predictable that Trump couldn't fire her because of the implication. Okay, you released that memo. Those are the dynamics. Shitty situation, but how many storms has Trump weathered before? And I'm not saying, by the way, that he won't weather this one. I think I don't think everyone is doing this, but there are some people who are dancing on his grave a little bit too early. I'm not actually sure that this will be the end of Trump or the end of MAGA or anything like that. It certainly won't be the end of our problems with the people who make up MAGA. That's going to be around for the rest of our lives. So, if I had to bet, I would say that they'd probably weather the storm again. But this one is hitting a little differently, and it felt a little different. What you need to get to is get people to move on, to shut up, let it go. And Trump only knows one way to do that. And it's the dumbest way you can do it in this context. Or it's to make a new problem, right? But in this case, people weren't forgetting about it. And I'm going to now show you the Truth Social post, which is driving everyone crazy. But Trump only knows the dumbest, most obvious way to do stuff, right? That's what he does with tariffs. He sends these bogus letters, making these pompous threats, and does the most outrageous thing. And so when Trump wants you to shut the up about something, he says, shut up about it. He literally says that. And in this context, and I knew right away, as soon as I read that message, this is the wrong move. What's going on with my boys, and in some cases, gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. Right away, right? He's now doubling down on Pam Bondi, which is precisely the opposite of what everyone is being primed for. He's standing by Pam Bondi, which of course he has to. He can't let her go. He can't let her go for the reasons we stated, because whoever she would be replaced with would be asked even more questions, and it would be all that people talk about, because you just fired your attorney general for the Epstein matter. If you fire your attorney general or your FBI director because of the Epstein matter, people are going to keep asking questions of their successors. So you got to stick by your people. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. I believe that. I 100% believe that. He wants the people to unify, but they can't unify. They can't unify because of the contradiction. We have a perfect administration. The talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it all over a guy who never dies. Jeffrey Epstein. Selfish people. He's calling his supporters who are pushing this issue selfish. That by remembering Jeffrey Epstein, you are being selfish. You are hurting me. You're hurting the administration. So he's casting his most devout followers who have bought into the mythology, who have bought into everything that they've been selling, the influencers and Trump, as selfish. There's reporting saying that Trump was saying that they're ungrateful. His supporters are ungrateful. Can you imagine that, by the way, taking a step out from seeing this from Trump's perspective? Can you imagine Trump calling his supporters ungrateful? Maybe the people who he freed from prison on Jan 6, but even then, they were only there because of him. The only reason Trump is not rotting in a jail cell right now is because of his supporters. And Trump is such an ungrateful piece of shit that he's calling his supporters ungrateful. That's not going to go over well. The supporters who have given their life, sometimes their families, will walk over glass to vote for this guy, who have bought his loyalty, literally sometimes with blood of others or blood of themselves. And the reporting is he's saying, oh, his supporters are ungrateful. His supporters who have been fucked over when it comes to the bills that he's signing, tax cuts largely for the rich. A lot of his core supporters are going to be hurt by the provisions there. A lot of the core supporters. And Trump calls them ungrateful. Trump calls them selfish for promoting and asking questions on a narrative which he and his loyalists are responsible for, and for an initiative that he undertook by letting his Department of Justice do this phase 1 Epstein files and even release the memo in the first place, coming to some conclusion about it. This is an egomaniac, an absolutely deranged person, but they're not going to appreciate it. The supporters are not going to appreciate. I mean, this never plays over well. Attacking the chat, right? Well, sometimes I'll attack you guys, but going over your own supporter it's never going to play well. Those are the people that you need in the comments defending you, and the implication that they're selfish people. The reason is because it works with other people, right? It works with other leaders, perhaps. Works with senators that he's trying to push. And Trump only knows one way, which is like brute force. He's not subtle about it. Over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. That sounds like you just you're so stupid that anyone was ever talking about this. So in addition to directly calling them selfish, you're calling them stupid. You're calling them stupid that they dropped this in the first place. Why won't we just let it die? And then the next part is priceless. But first, he repeats this again. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Yeah, your guys, the people you're calling selfish, who've talked about this, and where you have acknowledged their issues, and you specifically ran on this issue. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. This is another spit in the face of everyone who's been pushing this as important. The loyalists, the base. You're saying, well, you guys are fucking idiots for pushing this the whole time. Bro, read the room. Next sentence is the craziest shit of all time. Quote, why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more. And all of you have seen this analysis, but it bears repeating because it's just the most ridiculous thing. So the Epstein files, this Epstein list, he's saying they're written by Democrats. He's saying specifically they're written by Obama, Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and Biden administration. It doesn't even pass the smell test. Even the conspiratorial, one thing is Big Steph fan got it. He doth protest too much, 100%. This, even just the framing of this, it reads as super fucking guilty. Super guilty. Even just the framing of it, it's far too defensive. But put that aside, look at the actual merits here. So for the first time ever, Sunday of current year in July of current year, you're now alleging the Epstein files aren't about the Democrats, but were actually created by the Democrats. And this makes everyone think, if his inclination is to say the files are fake, there must be something bad about them, about him in them, right? And he's making the connection for everyone else. The Russia hoax, in my opinion, the hoax is a hoax. The notion that Russia is a hoax is itself a hoax. That hoax is fundamentally about Trump and makes him look bad, right? The 51 intelligence agents bullshit about the Hunter Biden laptop and all that shit, which is a fake narrative that they've promoted. What I'm saying is their narrative that it's a fake narrative is itself a fake narrative, but that makes Trump look bad, right? Because it's claiming that what they're promoting is Russian misinformation or some kind, in some way connected to Russia. The dossier, the SEAL dossier, same thing, right? So the connection here is, if this is just like those other things that make you look bad, then the Epstein files are going to make you look bad too. If you're saying that they're just like these other things that you're calling hoaxes, you don't even need to have that explained to you. Your brain is coming to that logical conclusion. It's a comparison that he's making. It's not subtle at all. It's literally him comparing what he says are the fake hoaxes that make Trump look bad and saying this is just like that, which means whatever files exist, he's saying he has information to make them inference or to make the claim for the first time ever that it makes him look bad. So that's why everyone's saying, okay, this is the guiltiest thing of all time. He's making that connection himself, and it makes no sense. And even MAGA knows it. Come on, guys. The Epstein files aren't supposed to be made by Democrats. They're supposed to be about Democrats. And also, you've now contradicted yourself in the course of 6 months, like 3 times. Initially, you say, we're going to release all the Epstein files. Next, you're going to, we'll release them. They're really juicy, but we got to go through them. To, I'm sorry, Epstein didn't kill himself. We're still reviewing stuff. There is nothing there. There is something there, but it was written by Democrats. Looks horrible. And everyone knows it. You're changing your story. And you can try to do, we'll see what play it gets. I saw Alex Jones trying to be like, hey, maybe there's something to it. But it looks horrible. It's a Johnny-come-lately theory, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to say, they invented something to go after Trump. What it feels good to say is Joe Biden is a file. What it feels good to say is Bill Clinton's kids. That's what it feels good to say for the MAGA people. It doesn't feel good to have another, it's a hoax just like everything else. That's a defensive posture, guys. That's a defensive thing that they say, Russia, at the accusations of the left. What the Epstein accusations are, they're offense for MAGA. It doesn't fit, right? The Epstein files, what they are used to saying is, this is evidence for our case of corruption. This is central to our thesis, our narrative. And this is what they're trying to hide, and Biden's behind it, and his administration's behind it. And it's a good offensive tool that they like to use to convert it into a defensive explanation. Feels bad. Everyone knows that. If you're a MAGA faithful, So even just in terms of the feeling of it, it won't satisfy you, because what MAGA wants to do is accuse the Clintons, accuse Israel, perhaps if you're one of the Groyper types or anti-Israel types. It's broader than Groyper now. They want to accuse people. They don't want to defend themselves. So that's shitty. And as I said, it's changing the story, right? It's changing the narrative. So if it were just changing the narrative, but it were still offensive, maybe it would play a little better. But it's all these things, right? It's the fact that it's a spurned expectation, that they were hyped and then let down. So it's the disappointment factor. It's the fact that it's a brand new theory. It's the fact that it's a change theory. And it's the fact that it's a defensive as opposed to an offensive theory. So it's all those things, right? It's not sitting well. No one believes it. It's too convenient. It's too cute. And it fundamentally puts, and now you see it, right? Because whereas before the right wing would try to bring up Epstein even when it didn't even make sense to bring him up, now they'll do anything to avoid it. But they can't avoid it because their audiences don't want to avoid it. And the audience just simply doesn't understand. In a second, we'll take a look at the Viva Frei thing, by the way. And you'll see the conversation, it feels like they're speaking analytically, and you might get lulled into the sense that they're making sense, that they're actually analyzing something with some amount of intellectual rigor. But if you take a step back, it's actually frighteningly cultish. Continuing on, they created the Epstein files, just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, right? You're making that connection even stronger. This is like the Steele dossier. Wait, the Epstein files are like the Steele dossier? What did the Steele dossier say, folks? Do you guys remember what the Steele dossier said? Among other things? P mattress, yeah. Compromat, right? The Russians have dirt on Trump, that he peed on the mattress, that he was like into pee or something, some sort of compromising video involving fetishes / sex. You're making the comparison. You're saying this is like that? What a horrible framing decision. Now, if it's true, here's the problem. If it's true, it doesn't even make sense for another reason. Why not show how shitty it is, right? Why not debunk it? Bring it out there and be like, look, this is not true because of da-da-da. Why not talk about it? But you won't even talk about it. It makes it look guiltier. So you're making that comparison. That's not a good comparison for you. So I don't know who thought to do this. And again, going after his supporters. And now my so-called quote unquote friends are playing right into their hands. The victim complex that he's had for his entire life. The victim complex. He's going after his fans. He's going after his fans. You never attack the fans. I saw the other day, who's that guy, Patrick Bet-David? He threw the tampon. It's not Alex. It's Adam something. It's not Adam something. It's Adam. I think his last name starts with an S. I don't know. But Adam's like, all you guys are mouth breathing idiots who believe this story or something. And you should see the comments on that video, bro. You should see the comments on that video. They're like, get rid of Adam. Adam's a piece of shit. He just with the fans. You don't say fuck the fans, bro. If you're on the mic saying fuck the fans, man, like, don't say fuck the fans. And that's what he's doing. He's saying you're fake friends to everyone who is asking questions. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? I mean, this question makes you doubt the president's sanity. That's a question that I want to ask, right? If what you're saying is these files are like the Steele dossier, guess what? The Steele dossier was released. If this was crafted by Biden, Obama, Clinton, Brennan, Comey, why didn't they release it? It doesn't even make sense. If there was a clutch of documents and, stuff that's faked about perverted situations that were intentionally made to f with you, why wouldn't they have been released? If what you're saying is true, that these are forgeries, doesn't make sense. Even a Trump person's going to see that inherent contradiction. And also, why wouldn't they release them? That applies to you, bro. FBI got that evidence in 2019-18. They did raids back then. They were in the possession of your government, and your rallying cry was release them. So now you're saying, why didn't the Dems release them? Why won't you release them? So in addition to the contradiction on they made the files themselves, it's a fraud, the whole why won't they release them also is a contradiction to your position of authority now. You now have the power to release them. And so you asking why don't they release them, you know that this is like, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So this whole portion of why won't they release them, it's going to send a MAGA conspiracy, like their blood's going to be boiling. If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? Same question, same answer, right? If what you're saying is accurate, if there's something in there that's fake that would have hurt MAGA, why wouldn't they use it? And there's another question that you can ask in addition to that. If there's nothing in there that hurts MAGA, why won't you release it? You get me? So one part of that is, once again, it undermines the notion that the Democrats made it fraudulent and did all this work to create some fraudulent set of documents at a time when you weren't even a political force. That's consistent with a pattern of abuse from Epstein and a friendship that goes back to like the 90s. So that's like a weird situation. It undermines that. That's a great question that undermines that. But it's also, the inverse can be asked of you right now. If there was nothing in there that hurt the MAGA movement, why wouldn't you release it? Presumably because it would hurt the MAGA movement. And I want to stress here, I'm still agnostic about what that would be, right? Maybe it's nothing. This makes it seem like there's something, embarrassing at least. Doesn't necessarily have to be criminal. They haven't even given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. files. I don't even know what that means. They haven't given up. By that, you mean the fake friends? Or by that, you mean the lefties? Or like, I don't know. No matter how much success we've had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, lol, emergency energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons, lol, it's never enough for some people. Again, the same theme of bitterness. There's a large degree of bitterness here going after the fans. You guys never are grateful. You're never saying thank you to me. It's ridiculous to make this accusation of a movement that it feels like their entire reason for being is thanking Trump for shit he doesn't even do. Thank you, Trump, for the sun. Thank you, Trump, because I got married today. Thank you, Trump, for us even having any economy at all. Thank you, Trump, for ending whatever, right? Like, they'll take credit for Biden stuff. They'll take credit for Obama stuff. They'll thank Trump till the cows come home. So for him to be like, you guys aren't grateful. First of all, you shouldn't be grateful because he's objectively the worst president. But more than that, they have been grateful, incredibly grateful. Grateful to the point of confabulation about your record. Sir, we are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years. In 6 months, can you imagine thinking the last 6 months have been more achieved than, like, I don't know, Lincoln's entire administration, winning a civil war, FDR's entire administration, hell, even like, Lyndon B. Johnson's administration. The 6 months that we've had have been horrible. Maybe if you mean achieve in terms of hurt people unnecessarily. We are saving our country, making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating all this other shit, right? Voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, rigged his own election, and arrested. So all this, by the way, is Trump interfering in the Department of Justice like he always did. By itself, this is the shit that they were saying, oh, Biden is weighing in on the Department of Justice. So like never let them live down the fact that Trump is like regularly commanding the DOJ to start political prosecutions. Instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired... What is a radical left-inspired document? A radical left-inspired document? That is to say, a fabrication by the radical left? Or that you would only get these documents if you were the radical left? Now you're calling your supporters, your key supporters, leftists? It is not doing its job. Speaking of doing the jobs, let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. Not what they want to hear. Not at all what they want to hear. They don't want to hear that Pam Bondi's doing a good job. They want to hear that Pam Bondi is doing a bad job. She's the supposed scapegoat. But as we've talked about before, Trump can't get rid of her. And that tells you the key issue here, which is, as you already know if you're watching this stream, the problem is Trump's. There's something fishy here, and Trump doesn't want it to get out. Or there's nothing there, and that's the honest truth. But the thing is, if there's nothing there, why invent this whole narrative about the fake Democrats? The fake Democrat documents or whatever. Like, if you just want to stand by what your Department of Justice said, your Department of Justice didn't say that the documents were inspired by the left. The Department of Justice didn't come to that conclusion. So now Trump is contradicting Pam Bondi, right? Trump is contradicting Pam Bondi's conclusion while at the same time saying that she's doing a great job, right? So there's an internal contradiction even there. You're saying Pam Bondi's doing a great job, but you're coming to a conclusion that she does not reach in that memo. So it doesn't make any sense. That's what she's looking at into as AG and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, someone that nobody cares about. Somebody that no one cares about. That's another shot at the bow. So this message didn't make anything better. It only made things worse. And it underscores the level of the crisis at the moment. That you would think that this is going to assuage anyone's fears. It must show either a complete lack of any understanding of the audience of the MAGA base, or panic. And I smell fear. I smell it. I feel the panic and the fear in a way I haven't felt on other stuff. I'm not saying he's doomed. I'm not saying anything like that, but I can smell the fear. This is not a well thought out message. This is making things worse. Much, much, much worse. So let me address Cenk Uygur for a second, because Cenk Uygur takes this opportunity to feel vindicated. Cenk says, I had a disagreement with many other left-wing hosts. They said Trump voters are all a cult and they would never criticize Trump. Now that even MAGA is ripping into Trump over Epstein, this debate is over, right? It'd be detached from reality not to think that they're not criticizing him. So Cenk's old play here is he's vindicated. He feels vindicated that there's criticism coming from MAGA towards Trump. This is my response and something I wholeheartedly agree with because I wrote it. I say the following. Please stop rewriting history. You stated that you were optimistic for Trump's presidency because the establishment and mainstream media had been defeated. That optimism, given the hell we are living in under Trump 2.0, has been shown to be completely unfounded and always was. You further expressed faith in the right-wing populist base, that the base would be able to pressure the Trump administration or Elon Musk to extract common sense policy wins. There have been exactly zero policy wins or extractions for the betterment of the people. So I want to be clear about that. So he always misses this part, right? It's not this untethered criticism that he was trying to sell his his audience on. It was that he was optimistic that you would actually get concessions because of the pressure. It's only now that he's changed it and seems to think like untethered criticism is what he was talking about. He clearly wasn't. He was talking about trying to like be on the administration and join these councils and help Doge find waste, fraud, and abuse and go to Charlie Kirk. You take this preposterous victory lap at a time when the MAGA base was recently celebrating the One Big Beautiful Bill, a law that ripped healthcare and food from millions of Americans, inflated the defense budget, which you set out as your benchmark for prediction. So I want to stress again, he said if they increase the budget of the military defense spending without, and they're able to do that and not be pressured out of doing that, that'll show that I'm wrong. So he already set his benchmark for his own prediction, which failed. Because obviously the OBBB increased defense funding tremendously and funded a mass deportation strategy, which is currently wreaking havoc on this country from a humanitarian due process perspective. You celebrate, notwithstanding the fact that Trump initiated a war against Iran, right? Like war against, again, supported by his base with only a few grumbles by media hosts. No one ever said that MAGA never pushes back on Trump. They do so only in rare circumstances when MAGA's conspiratorial mythology is challenged. Hence, vaccines and Trump's unwillingness to take credit for Operation Warp Speed. This is well known to everyone 2021 and has been for years. The MAGA base's dogma, shaped by Trump and his loyalists, has become a beast of their own making. And so this is, again, what I want to stress. Everyone knows that MAGA will sometimes grumble, and criticize, even sometimes strongly, Trump. It's when their conspiratorial mythology, their dogma, is challenged by Trump in a way that he can't table set, or he can't change the dogma. And in one instance, that's the COVID vaccine, the conspiracy behind the COVID vaccine. And the conspiratorial mythology is also true, by the way, of this situation, the Epstein situation. You want to know something else? The stolen 2020 election narrative. If you tried to convince them now that the election wasn't stolen in 2020 and actually Biden won fairly and squarely, this would not be something that the base would critique him endlessly on this. So it's not, strictly speaking, that there's nothing that the MAGA base will ever critique Trump on. It's that it's rare. It's not on matters of policy like you were trying to sell. It has to do with their conspiratorial mythology. COVID, the election being stolen, the Epstein stuff, that kind of shit. Not Medicare, not Medicaid, not war, not the defense budget. That's the difference. And this has always been the position. We know that the MAGA booed Operation Warp Speed. And we know there's a reason why Trump doesn't hail Operation Warp Speed, which is something amazing that was done under his term. And that is one of the greatest accomplishments in invention medical history, done in record time, crazy time. But he doesn't take credit for it. Why? Because it conflicts with the mythology. It conflicts with the conspiratorial mythology. Rest assured, this pressure from MAGA comes from a place of deep religiosity. That's another thing, right? Like, the cult mentality is there. It is a cult. But a cult doesn't just operate in one simple way. For example, some people would say that the Westboro Baptist Church is a cult. They excommunicated Fred Phelps when he went against part of the dogma, because he went over to the gay neighbor and either apologized or was trying to make amends. It's not a cult. It is a cult, but it's not simply centered around Trump as such. It's centered around Trump, and also Trump as a savior, as a ratifying, unifying force, as a savior, and they're going to give him all sorts of benefits out, and they're still doing it, against a conspiratorial mythology framework. It's not just Trump in isolation, in other words. It's Trump in the context of the overarching mythology, the deep state narratives. You're being screwed. They're kids to try to cover, and they're covering everything up. The election was stolen from you. It's that mythology and Trump's place in it. It's not Trump in isolation of all that other context. And what the kind of pressure you're getting here, and as I'll get into here, is religious in nature, and that it's, or I should say it's at least a closed system of thought. Questions abound about the extent of involvement between Epstein and third parties and intelligence agencies and Trump himself. But as of now, there is no smoking gun proof for any of the salacious claims. Yet we are dealing with a group of people who would never accept any investigation that doesn't in some way validate their preconceived notions, right? So this is not undermining the cult accusation. This is further solidifying the cult narrative. If the MAGA base were revolting against Trump on issues like this, like they were doing on the defense budget, okay, Cenk vindicated. If they were doing it on Medicaid, okay, Cenk vindicated. If they were doing it on matters related to the Iran war, okay, Cenk vindicated. This ain't that. This is the fact that the MAGA base has this dogma and is unwilling to shed it, regardless of any kind of investigatory process, is furthering the notion that there are cults. It's just that you misunderstand the cult. The cult isn't just Trump. It's Trump as savior. Savior against what? Savior against the deep state. Savior against the Democrats. And also a great point from Dylan Thomas, they aren't even fully revolting on Trump yet. They're casting the blame in terms of Pam Bondi. He's getting bad advice. Which of them have condemned Trump? Now, I would call this pressure, but as of now, it's just grumble. We'll see. But even if they do end up leaving him, it doesn't undermine the fact that this is a cult. The Trumps, Bonginos, Patels, Kirks, etc. of the world should be mocked and attacked for their lack of transparency and their inability to produce the goods on claims they made for years re Epstein. And also really put this in context. Imagine for years, if you're Kash Patel or Dan Bongino, imagine for years saying the Biden administration is their file covering scum, maligning all these people, then to come to the conclusion that they were correct the whole time. Wouldn't you die of shame? I would rather die than accuse someone falsely of something with no evidence. And then when the truth is brought to my attention, let's say that I made a mistake or something, not apologize to each and every person that I falsely accused of covering up failure. I'd literally rather die. Can you imagine going and building an entire audience, a source of revenue on the basis of attacking innocent people and then not making amends? Right? You built this entire framework around going after these individuals and saying that they're covering up and or involved in these situations. And the FBI comes to the determination that actually there's no third parties. Well, you were accusing Clinton of being a pedo. Not that Bill Clinton has absolutely some credible accusations of sexual improprieties, but it's on another level. And even putting aside the Clinton aspect of it, if you want to put that aside, it was other people too, other third parties, and individuals associated with the Department of Justice and quote unquote deep state that you've basically said are running cover for Epstein. So they need to, if they're going to push this narrative, nothing to see here, Trump and everyone else needs to apologize. But do not mistake the pushback we are seeing now as a vindication for your strategy, that is to say, Cenk Uygur's strategy, of playing nice and bridge building with people like Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk, who should be opposed at all costs, or support for the notion that somehow we're going to see some genuine wins for the American people as a result of MAGA populist pressure on Trump from the base. That's basically what's going on here. Cenk is trying to launder his claim from the claim that, oh, I'm optimistic, the MAGA populist base is for real. They're actually going to pressure Trump into being pro-populist and getting all these amazing wins for the working class, being anti-war and being anti-military spending, all that shit. That's the shit that I'm talking about. That's his narrative. That's where the optimism came from. He's trying to frame that as everyone said that Joe Rogan would never criticize Trump. Can you imagine? Can you find anyone who said Joe Rogan will never grumble about Trump, or that some of these opportunists who supported Trump will never? People were predicting Elon Musk breaking up with Trump. They were taking bets on when it would happen. Can you imagine, instead of being honest about what your narrative was, that you were looking for pressure from the right-wing populist base on policy shit, not on Epstein narrative shit, and now claiming a victory and thinking that, wait, what these people were saying is they'll never criticize Trump, when we have absolute verifiable proof that with respect to with respect to the vaccines, they're willing to criticize Trump, and no one's ever denied that. Can you imagine instead, like, pretending your whole point was anytime one person or even many people critique Trump, I'm vindicated? Because now you've broadened the critique of your position to be, well, anyone who breaks with Trump vindicates me. No, you were trying to bridge build with Charlie Kirk, with Elon Musk, to try to like influence Doge. And you were trying to say that we were going to see wins, pressure that manifested in wins. I think at some point you said 20%. 20% we'd see wins on defense budget. No new wars. So spare me with this sanctimonious shit where he's claiming victory. He was claiming victory when Joe Rogan was like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't deport Kilmar Abrego. And he was declaring victory. It's because you don't understand the scope of the cult. It's not just Trump. It's Trump as savior. It's Trump as savior figure in the context of the mythology. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. That's why you have the COVID situation, and the COVID's another one, right? Lab leak theory. That's part of the mythology too. So really, I find it, I say later on that I hope he's right? I hope he's right, but I think he's very wrong.